8:30 and 9:30 a.m. in Australia, and we're Facebook Live and we're live. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be with you again. We have a very special guest, my friend and my colleague, and our team just referred to us before we went live as the King and Queen. Well, I bowed to the king, so I guess I'm a queen. Don't tell my wife, but Dr. Christine Schaffner has been in the field quite a while, and she's one of the courageous ones that I'm proud to call a colleague that doesn't stop her learning or exploring concepts because they're outside the paradigm of how she was initially taught. Mm-hmm. And she has sought out the gurus in areas of health that most people, they just can't fathom what these gurus are talking about. Christine not only gets in there and digests and chews up the information and asks tremendous questions, but she now applies a lot of those principles. And it takes a lot of guts to talk about things that people think are woo-woo or not the everyday. I experienced that when I first came out in practice in 1980. We opened on Valentine's Day in 1980, and my mentor, I had two mentors at the time. One was Dr. George Goodhart, the founder of muscle testing, applied kinesiology, which was considered real woo-woo. And my other mentor was Dr. Jeffrey Bland, the founder of functional medicine. So I was like on the seesaw all the time between what you really can't explain very well scientifically, but works really well, and all science, right? It was the combination of both that kind of formed my ways of thinking. And first, Christine, welcome. Glad that you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So who were your mentors? Who were the mentors that guided you into going in such depth on the areas that you focus on?
You know, it's a great question, and I have many mentors, and one of the ones that, you know, comes to mind first is Dr. Louisa Williams, who wrote a book called Radical Medicine, and she is a naturopath, chiropractor, and she also has her nutrition degree. And when I was in Bastyr, I was already a student when I met her work and found her. She spoke to us at a brown bag lunch, and she said, you know, what is the first thing you ask every patient? And I was like, you know, we're all like, take them off gluten or whatever. And she's like, you look in their mouth. And, you know, that ties in the whole work that we do with dentistry and how that affects our whole body. But she had this, it was before the Kindle. And so I toted around this like 1,000-page book in my bag while I was in school. And I just really felt strongly, I don't know what she's talking about, but I want to learn her medicine and what she really is teaching us. And it's really getting to that root cause of why people are so sick today, or at least the patients I see. And so she was kind of that premonition of doing the work that I've done over the last 10 years. I've worked with Dr. Klinghardt, and now I'm working in my own practice, but he, you know, really, Dr. Klinghardt and Dr. Williams actually work together, and they know Goodhart's work and, you know Noshi's work and a lot of the, you know, pioneers and muscle testing and bioenergetics. And they came together and created a form of muscle testing called autonomic response testing. And so that really imprinted me when I was in school. And then it led me to spend 10 years, you know, digesting and learning this. And then I feel like I have so many mentors and colleagues and friends who I'm just so inspired by. And that's why we do these educational summits that I know that you've done. You were a pioneer in the summit world, Dr. Tom, I think, right? You had, I think, the first big summit, right? On gluten. Yeah. And so, you know, so the summit that I'm doing right now is on biological medicine. And I really wanted to interview my mentors and my colleagues and my friends who are not always have these platforms to educate because they're nose down in their practice, or they're just, you know, doing their research. And so I highlight a lot of them, you know, in the series that I just produced. But I love learning, and, you know, I love doing this work. And I think that's where, you know, I connect, is that you never stop learning, or, you know, if we're not evolving, like, we're dead, right? So it's all, It's all a
That's
process.
exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, you're like me in that way, that we'll never stop learning. When
Mm,
when I'm asked what's my hobby, and I say reading studies,
mm,
that I really enjoy that. That's downtime for me, and and I know it's the same for you in your work. I'm going to do a couple shout outs here. So Wanda was the first one to say hello today. Hi, Wanda. You're in Long Island. Cindy's in Philadelphia. Steph is in Missouri. Laura's in Murrieta, California. Maureen's in Massachusetts. Mary's in Tampa. Gregory is from the Republic of Texas. Okay, Gregory. That's good. That's good. Patricia's embrace the woo-woo. Yes, Patricia, absolutely. Tracy says two of my favorites. And the list goes on. Ira's here from the Philippines. Rakesh is here from Maryland. Nancy's in Headley, Massachusetts. Thank you, everyone. And I'll keep saying hello. And if you have questions for Dr. Christine, feel free to write them in here in the comments, and I'll bring the questions up. But I'll start with the first one that I have for you, Dr. Christine, on what your summit that you've just worked so hard to put together that's coming out. What is bioregulatory or biological medicine? How do you explain that to people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you again for being on the series. So I hope everyone, checks out your talk. You did a great job explaining all of this as well. And so, the summit's called Beyond Biological Medicine. So I've been trained in biological medicine, which is a system of medicine that comes out of Europe. The Americans who took this medicine out of, who have studied in Germany are now really pioneering the use of the term bioregulatory medicine. There's a Bioregulatory Medicine Institute, and they want to differentiate because the word biological can sometimes be misconstrued with a big pharma biologics kind of category. So they really wanted to, branch out and call it bioregulatory medicine. So you'll hear me say those words as I'm trying to update my vocabulary, and they mean the same thing. And I think bioregulatory is actually more exact, because what we're trying to explain in biological or bioregulatory medicine is the body is inherently intelligent, right? And so I learned that in school. We called it the vital force in naturopathic school. I know in chiropractic schools and other, alternative healing modalities, it's from that premise that we understand that there's this innate wisdom in the body that always is moving us towards health. However, modern life, all sorts of reasons that we educate people all day long, we basically get in touch with roadblocks that block our innate ability to self-regulate and heal. So the whole word bioregulatory medicine is coming from this premise first, that we all agree that the body knows how to regulate and heal, and we need to remove what those obstacles that is preventing the body to self-regulate and heal when people are sick. And it's a very comprehensive system, and why I really like it, it brings a lot of modalities. When we're in the alternative medical profession, we have so many tools. That's one of our strengths and our weaknesses, because it can be overwhelming for people, and sometimes we give people too much to do, but we'll always have something to tell someone when someone comes to see us. And I have a lot of respect for my conventional colleagues, and a lot of respect for neurologists. They are like brilliant people who go to school for decades, and then they have like 5 drugs and a couple procedures, and it's like, that's just kind of the difference. And so biological medicine has this really big toolkit. So it encompasses the field of bioenergetics. It encompasses naturopathic medicine and acupuncture and plant medicine and all sorts of things. So it takes all of that into account. And then we're always just trying to prioritize and apply the right treatment at the right time with the right support to get the body to regulate. So it's really this concept that health is regulation, health is resilience, and how do we really adapt and respond to life stressors so that we can be well.
That's a great overview. So many different approaches, and practitioners talk about looking for root cause, and they call it complementary medicine, integrative medicine, functional medicine, biological medicine. And my experience, when people ask me, how do I find a practitioner? it goes back to my days teaching martial arts. You know, I used to teach a lot of martial arts, and people would ask me, how do I find the right teacher for my son? Because he wants to take martial arts, you know, he wants, and I would always say the same thing. It's not the discipline. It doesn't matter if it's karate or judo or aikido. It's the teacher. That it's the energy and the outlook of the teacher that makes the difference. And when someone has a health concern and looking for information, it isn't really the category of a practitioner. It doesn't matter if they're a functional medicine practitioner, a biological medicine practitioner, a complementary medicine, integrative medicine practitioner. What matters is what that person has learned and what they're applying in practice. Because you get people who, I can speak from experience, they're certified in functional medicine, but they do the same cookbook things to every patient that comes in with a gut problem. And they're not being personal about that. And I know that's true in all of the disciplines. My sense is those that are practicing biological medicine or biotherapeutics, was that the term you used?
Bioregulatory.
Bioregulatory, right. They're newer in the category. Bioregulatory medicine is newer, and it's to differentiate and say, you know, we're really looking at every piece of the puzzle as much as we can. And that's what functional medicine is, looking at every piece of the puzzle as much as we can. But functional medicine is more about diagnosis than it is about clinical recommendations. So if a person watches today and they say, okay, I want a bioregulatory medicine practitioner, is that how would you answer the question if someone says, how do I find a martial arts teacher for my student or for my child? How do I find a practitioner for my sick child? Do you recommend them to bioregulatory, or in a big picture, not specific to what you do or what I do, what kind of a recommendation do you give people as to how to look?
It's a great question. And it's, you know, of course, until we completely change, you know, the paradigm of medicine and have more schools and more, you know, practitioners and more physicians who, you know, do this work that really, I believe, is the future of medicine and really has the narrative and the framework to also meet the fear around, you know, the pandemic and everything. And it comes, you know, from that aspect. I'm just going to take a little detour and then I'll come back to your question. But, you know, with the biologic, the whole field of bioregulatory medicine, I think there are two key concepts that when we start looking for practitioners that might practice this, so you can look for your health, is there's this whole concept that most bioregulatory practitioners or physicians embrace, and it's this idea of the terrain. So the terrain has to do with, it's kind of this opposite idea of the germ theory. So the germ theory, it's like, you have a bug, you got to kill the bug, you're done. You know, which of course medicine's not black and white. So there's shades of gray and everything. But the terrain theory is going to be, you know, even Louis Pasteur, who really was one of the fathers of germ theory, on his deathbed, he's known to say the terrain is everything, right? So what that means is it's not necessarily the bug or the pathogen or the stress, it's the body's response to that stress. So how do we really take care of our terrain, and how do we make sure that we're more resilient, so no matter what stress that we come against, that our body can adapt, you know, respond, heal, and go on with life. And so modern illness, we get stuck along the way in many of those things. So when I think about the terrain, I think about, you know, a lot of the impact of our environment, which you do an amazing job with all your books and your education, having people really take small steps to make big changes in really cultivating their outer environment that's going to have a positive impact on their inner environment. And that has a huge effect on our resilience. So bioregulatory medicine really focuses on this whole concept of terrain. And then one other really unique differentiator that I feel like is still so under appreciated is this whole idea of what we call the extracellular matrix and how that also ties into the lymphatic system. So I find that a lot of bioregulatory practitioners really focus on how to have a healthy terrain by really addressing the extracellular matrix and the lymphatic system. And that improves our health in so many ways. And I'm happy to go into what all that means. So when you're kind of looking at where can you find help? We have so many wonderful people in our community, and they might have all sorts of different degrees or certifications, but you just really want to see if they have this really whole systems approach. And this really, I believe that the work with environmental toxicants and detoxification through supporting our terrain, extracellular matrix, and lymphatics is really important. And then a lot of these practitioners, Dr. Tom, use some form of bioenergetic assessment. So they can use, tools that actually measure the regulation of the nervous system, like heart rate variability, regulation thermometry. We look at the actual regulation of the nervous system, but often, this field of medicine is very much of the vocabulary has to do with bioenergetics and how our body responds to frequencies and how we have an electromagnetic nature. We know that we have an electromagnetic field in our heart, in our brain, and so forth. And so bioenergetics and, this form of, did I lose Dr. Tom, or he's there? But bioenergetics is a whole toolkit where these practitioners can essentially prioritize an individual, this big toolkit of treatments.
Dr. Tom did get knocked off for a minute. This is producer Mary Agnes.
Okay, I can keep talking.
Yeah, we have some questions that he prepared for you till he jumps back on. He said, ask her the written questions until I get back. Yes.
Yeah, great.
Well, everyone, I'm just going to be a talking head for a minute, but Dr. Christine, I'd love to ask you to talk about what's an interference field and how it can cause destabilization to the autonomic nervous system. And for people like me who can't even say that, can you explain what the autonomic nervous system is?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this whole idea is about regulation, right? How do we identify roadblocks so that our body can self-regulate and heal and do what it naturally knows how to do? And so a concept that comes out of neurotherapy, which is one of the tools within biological medicine, we use this idea of interference fields. So we're just talking about interference fields right now, Dr. Tom. So interference fields is a term that we use to basically name and identify either focal infections or scars that can be affecting our autonomic nervous system's ability to regulate, as well as it can have an impact on our lymphatic system or extracellular matrix in our terrain. And Mary Agnes had asked me to explain what is the autonomic nervous system. Probably a lot of your audience knows that, but the autonomic nervous system is part of our nervous system. When you think autonomic, think automatic. It's part of our nervous system that naturally regulates between what we call our sympathetic and our parasympathetic state. So we know that sympathetic is fight or flight. It's a very much needed part of our nervous system, but what happens in modern life, we stay in that state too long, and then parasympathetic is rest and digest. And so we're not in parasympathetic enough in modern days. So when modern life, we want to look at that balance between ability to change gears. And sometimes we get stuck in one gear a little too much. And so a lot of these therapies are to try to identify why we might be stuck in sympathetic or not basically activating our parasympathetic. There's also the, fight, flight, or even freeze, which is another whole conversation. But the autonomic nervous system is a really important part of our body's ability to self-regulate and heal. So interference fields can be things like scars. So scars can be from surgery, they can be from trauma, and scars can have an impact on the communication within our nervous system. Also, it can affect the lymphatics and fascia underneath that scar. So I often, when I treat people, we do like a scar, inventory, where are your scars, how did they happen, all of this stuff. And depending on, I use autonomic response testing, which is my form of bioenergetic assessment. And then if a scar comes up, I might treat it. And there's a lot of different ways to treat the scars. So I use neurotherapy.
Paul,
No, I can just keep going. Yeah.
I know you're like me, you know, and I can just go and go and go.
I know.
But
Just
people who are watching,
yeah.
people who are watching are trying to stay with this, and so and about scars. My first week in my education, my chiropractic education, this was January 1978. And there was a sign that Dr. Ray Nemo was coming from Texas to be on campus, and the founder of trigger point therapy. And I didn't know what that was, but why not? You know, I had some time, so I go see this guy. Turns out it was the last talk he ever gave.
Oh, wow.
Now, he was 84. And I walk in the room, here's this guy, tall, 6'4", 6'5", skin tight blue jeans, cowboy boots, cowboy hat. And he's talking about trigger points. Now, trigger points, some people know, but some don't. When you press on a point in a muscle, it can refer pain somewhere else, like down your arm, or if it's on your back, all of a sudden they're pressing in the upper back and you got low back pain. It can refer anywhere. And it's an accumulation of gunk or debris that has gotten kind of hard in there. You got to work it out. It's a special massage technique. And there was a medical doctor named Janet Travell that got famous for this work. She wrote a textbook on it, but she learned from Ray Nemo. And so Dr. Nemo would talk about that you have to get on this trigger point and you have to, and this is what he would say, and you gotta hit it. And he would say it like that, hit it. And this is an 84-year-old guy. And some doctor in the room said, but doctor, it's painful when you do that. Hit it anyway. And he said, but they fall on the floor. He said, get down on the floor. And he carried the message out like that. And so for me, a newbie, that's what I learned about massage therapy. That was massage therapy to me. So the next day, I start carrying a little bottle of oil in my back pocket. I was running marathons at the time and had met some runners already at school, and there was tables in every room. So I come here, man, lay down for 10 minutes between classes. And I start working their leg muscles, and I'd find these bumps and I'd hit it, and they would just jump off the table, but I'd stay on it. My point is, Dr. Nemo also talked about scars. And he said, scars are very similar to a trigger point in that they interfere with the electrical conductivity in the body. This was 1978. And this 84-year-old guy was talking about this. So when you have a scar, like I have a scar here. I don't know if you can see it on my arm. It was a bicycle accident. Oh gosh, that was, I don't know, maybe 2004, 2003. And when you have a scar on your body, when it heals, it should heal.
I think Dr. Tom is frozen for a moment, but he's probably getting at how scar tissue can affect. Are you there?
Oh, I froze again, did I?
You froze. So you were just getting to the point where scar tissue, it should heal, and then it cut.
Oh,
how should it heal properly?
Well, you could like carry on.
It's all good. Yeah, you got this.
When a scar heals anywhere on your body, the skin should be the same color all around the scar and around the skin. If it's not the same color, if it's darker, if it's red, that's energy blockage. There's heat there. Because, you know, we're electrical beings. Our bodies run on electricity, yes? And when you block a scar, that's the basis of acupuncture, is to open up the electrical flow in the body. And so if a scar is red or if a scar is white, it means it's anemic. It's a lack of energy. And we used to use ethyl chloride and just spray the scar. You spray it and then you move the tissue, stretch it a little bit wherever it is on the body. And You also can use an ice cube. It's a little messier because it gets wet, but the idea is to move, stretch, and put cold on it at the same time. The case that really stuck out for me was a 19-year-old girl that came to see me who kept getting a cough that would not go away. The cough would stay for 2 hours or 3 hours, and then it would go away, and the next day or 2 days later comes back again for 2 hours. Like that. It wouldn't stop. It wouldn't stop. And we looked at everything. Bacterial infections, viral infections, structural problems, couldn't find anything. And I looked over her body for scars, couldn't find anything. And I looked back in her history. I said, well, the only surgery you've ever had was having your tonsils taken out. She said, oh yeah, and that was really a mess. And how old were you for that? Well, I was 14 when they did that. And when did this coughing start? Well, it started a little bit about 3-4 years ago. So I saw there may have been a time sequence. So I looked at her mouth, and you could just see this red area on the side of her throat. And so we just treated the outside with ethyl chloride, spraying it and turning her head, leaning the neck in every direction, spraying, and she was saying, oh, that's so cold, that's so cold. The cough never came back again. So as you're talking about scars, I tell this story so people just understand the darndest things that you would never expect may be the emergency brake. You know how when you're backing out of a driveway, you say, well, what's wrong with this car? It's not going very well. It's moving, but it's really slow. Oh, the emergency brake. And you let it go, and then you heal, right? There's things that cause emergency brakes. And what it sounds to me like, Dr. Christine, is that what you're talking about here with this approach to medicine is looking for the emergency brakes anywhere in the body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great story. And I have a lot of, clinical anecdotes myself of, you treat a scar and, some other symptom that you would never expect, alleviates. And it's just one of the most fun parts of the work. And, scars can also hold emotions. And so sometimes people have, these like very cathartic emotional releases when you treat a scar. So it's a very rewarding therapy. And then that whole idea too. So in interference fields, they can be scars, which you've explained. And then this idea of focal infections that are often in the mouth. So they can be areas that are of infection that the immune system isn't having a proper response. And so it can be this kind of silent brewing infection that could be really draining the energy in the body. I'm of course being very oversimplistic in my explanation right now, and it can be affecting our lymphatic system, our nervous system. And until you address that area that is an infection, you could have this energy steal from the body that's preventing your body from self-regulating and healing. So we look a lot, in my new patient intake and kind of all of the doctors I've worked with over the years, we do a really fun history in the beginning of asking people about their surgeries and, all of their dental history, and trying to, of course, identify what could be a potential interference field, because a lot of people before they come see us have seen a lot of people, tried a lot of things, and they're not getting the results that we all want for them. And so this is the area that has a lot of gold when you identify and treat, that you can really help people return to their health.
Yes, and so is that the emphasis of this summit, is interviewing practitioners who look at health from that perspective?
Yeah. So we have a lot of fun people that I interviewed. And so a lot of people who are trained in these methodologies, learning about, speaking about interference fields. We have a whole day on interference fields, extracellular matrix, fascia, lymph. Fascia is a whole interesting topic. We talk about bioenergetics and all the different methodologies there. And, of course, the nervous system and the environment and, the role of epigenetics and how trauma and toxicants can affect us. And so we have, we're just trying to give people, more tools. I'm really passionate. Again, my goal is that, my patients see, often, 10 to 20 doctors before coming to see us and have been sick for more than 5 years. And it's like, if we can just empower people and give people this checklist, if you're not getting the results that we all want for you, let's start going down this checklist and see where you might be stuck, and then find a provider that can work with you to really uncover this, remove this, and return you to health.
Catherine has a question here. Appreciate your views on lipomas. Do they interfere with electrical connectivity in the body like scars or trigger points? I have tons of lipomas and keep developing more. Most are painful when touched.
Yeah, lipomas, and whatever you want to say too, Dr. Tom. So we actually, Dr. Ginger Nash is on the summit, and she talks all about miasm. And miasm has to do with how we each uniquely deal with environmental toxicants. And some people are what we call like cyst formers. They actually wall off potentially things that could be dangerous if they were in circulation. And so we can store a lot of toxicants in fat. And so sometimes, the body is wise and intelligent. So it could be an area of self-preservation where the body's trying to support you and walling off potentially environmental toxicants that you might have. I also see, I treat a lot of Lyme and co-infections, so I can't help but always, think of that. But Bartonella is a co-infection of Lyme that we call the cyst former. It tends to form cysts in the body, and some of our patients are prone to lipomas or cysts in the body when they have a Bartonella infection. But yeah, that's kind of what my thought process is when they're forming. And then, yes, I do believe because of the way that they are affecting the fascia, that they do affect the communication in the body.
I would say the exact same thing. And when I have patients with lipomas, one of the things that we look at is your immune system fighting some toxic chemicals? Do you have elevated levels of heavy metals? Do you have elevated levels of chemicals in your body? Do you have elevated antibodies to fight formaldehyde or to fight any toxic chemical, which would suggest to us you've got too much of that chemical or that metal or that virus or that bacteria in your body? Because it's an important point to remember, and Catherine, this is for you, that our fat cells are the depositories of the excess crud that our body can't get rid of. And that's one of the reasons I believe, and I've only found a couple of papers that suggest this, but when people have a little abnormally larger hips and thighs, that fat seems to store a whole lot of toxic crud. And when that area is overdeveloped, there's a couple of different reasons why that might happen to people. But one of them that I think about right away is accumulative toxic crud, whether it's from food allergies, food sensitivities, toxic chemicals, heavy metals, too much virus, too much bacteria, something like that to look at. So Catherine, hope that gives you a direction to look in. Couple of shout outs here, a couple of more shout outs to make. Christy's in Houston, Jillian's in Cleveland, Maylene's in the Philippines, Dwayne says hello. Jerry's here from my group of guys that we've been together for many, many years. Hey, Jerry, thanks for being here. Patricia is here, says bioenergetics resiliency is worthy of focus. Amen to that. Amen to that. And a thought came up while you were talking, Dr. Schaffner, and that is that a number of years ago, we were introduced to this concept of epigenetics. And we talked about the gene. If there's only about 23,000 human genes, and genes stimulate when you turn a gene on, it makes a protein. And that protein is a communication that goes somewhere to do something. And that's kind of how genes activate function. There's about 23,000 human genes. There's over 3.5 million, 3 to 3.5 million bacterial genes in our body, let alone all the viruses we have. But in the bacterial genes, they're making proteins telling us what to do. It's our, for me, my mentor, and Professor Yehuda Schonfeld, he tells us that 36% of all the small molecules in the bloodstream are the metabolites of the bacteria in the gut. So 36% of everything in your bloodstream is the exhaust from the bacteria in your gut. Now, why is all of that exhaust from bacteria in the bloodstream, Dr. Schaffner?
Well, I would say a way of it's a communication. I mean, it obviously is communicating, right?
Right. Everyone here, I'm sorry, I didn't put you on the spot, but I knew that you knew. Right? Everyone here knows that I've said it so many times, for every message, one message from the brain going down, tell the gut what to do. There are 9 messages from the gut going up, telling the brain what to do. This is how it happens, is that the exhaust of the bacteria in our gut, called the metabolites of the bacteria, the action of the bacteria, get in the bloodstream, and they're the messengers that actually operate the dimmer switches. Our genes are not on an on-off switch. Our genes are on a dimmer switch. And the brightness of that dimmer switch for the Alzheimer's gene, if you carry the Alzheimer's gene, you don't want that dimmer switch turned up bright. You want it turned down low. Well, how's that occur? By the metabolites from the microbiome in your gut. They have a major contribution to the dimmer switch of your genes. Are they turned up bright? Well, you want the anti-inflammatory genes turned up bright, and you want the inflammatory genes turned down low. So when you talk about the terrain, that's what I think of. And the extracellular matrix, what I think of is this is the arena where the dimmer switches are being turned up high or turned down low, is in the terrain of our extracellular matrix.
I love that. I think that's an amazing.
Is that on the money?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. I think that's amazing. A great explanation, and I love the dimmer switch. I think I haven't used that analogy when I share that with patients, and I think it's way truer to reality what's happening in our body. Right? We're not this on-off switch, and we are more shades of gray. Right? And so.
Yes.
Mm.
Some of the guests on your summit, can you tell us some of the topics that your guests talk about?
Of course. So we're in full swing. So we're on day 2. So we already had a day around terrain where we had Dr. Zach Bush, who is really, I think, a really inspiring speaker on the whole idea of terrain and the microbiome and the virome. And he really connects us with this idea that our bodies, what we're experiencing with a lot of this rise in chronic illness, is directly interrelated with the terrain of Mother Earth. So he did a really inspiring talk. And then Kiran Krishnan, who he's the founder of Megaspore, and he has a wonderful product, and he talks a lot about how our microbiome is a huge part of our immune system, and dives into the science around that. And then I have a couple people talk about bioenergetics. We had Dr. Buttar talk about bioenergetics, as well as Dr. Karim Danani, who is a friend out of Toronto that I've gone to Germany with. And then Kim Chi Moyer, who is a practitioner who she does Vega testing. And so she has been doing that for decades, and really is she created a system called Resopathy, and really wants to share that how she can measure this electrical communication in the body. And then we can see what, how the body responds to stress and what alleviates that stress. And so she has a career of that. And then we have a whole day on the extracellular matrix, fascia, lymph, and interference fields. We also bring in dentistry in that day. So we have Dr. Nunnally, who's in Texas, and Dr. Freeman. And then we, of course, talk about toxicants. So our friends who talk about EMF, Lloyd Burrell, and then Jeffrey Smith and Dr. Michelle Perot talk about glyphosate and GMOs. The psycho-emotional work, which I think is really important, also another epigenetic trigger. And so Nikki Gratrix, who is wonderful at talking about this work. And then through this summit, I met an Austrian man named Rasmus Berghaus, and he created a system called Sound of Soul, which takes your heart rate variability and plays it into music and then plays it back to you to create more kind of coherence in the electromagnetic field in the heart. And he studied with Dr. Emoto, who's the water guy, so that was really fun. You're, of course, on there, Dr. O'Brien, which is awesome. You did a great talk on, of course, biological medicine and the brain and the nervous system. And then we talked about miasm with Dr. Ginger Nash. And then I have two experts, bioregulatory medicine experts, Dr. James Odell, who founded BRMI.online. So people want to learn more about what bioregulatory medicine is. It's just a nonprofit and it's purely about education. And you can go on there and learn about all of this. And then Dr. Dan Beelan, he has a system called Alpha Thermometry, which is a form of regulation thermometry. So it's another way to measure the autonomic nervous system. So that's just off the top of my head, but we have a lot of great speakers, and I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and it was a really, it was a joy to put together.
Marvelous, marvelous. And for our listeners, it's completely overwhelming to listen to all of these speakers and all their, these are people who have been at it 20, 30 years, or some of us, unfortunately, 40 years, right? Some of the old guys. And so we talk about sophisticated concepts and we try to put it in everyday language as best as we can. That's a job of a good host, and you're great at this, Dr. Christina.
Well, thank you.
Is to help to interpret what these people are saying. But I want to say to everyone, the link is here to register for this summit. And the reason you want to register is you may listen to one interview and you listen for 10 and say, I'm not into this, and you let it go. Then you listen to another one and say, wow, I really like this. And you pick something up that you implement. You do not have to listen to everything. And you do not have to try to absorb everything. You can't. It's overwhelming. Don't even try. That actually, I'm going to ask you this question, Dr. Christine. I'm going to comment first on a question that came in here. But the question I want you to answer is, how does a registrant do your summit successfully? So we'll do that answer in just a minute. But Leah asked the question, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease a couple of years after I had my second C-section. Can it be related to the scar? So I'll ask you that question first.
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of what you're going through is multifactorial, but I think a part of your healing is addressing the C-section scar. That can be with a neurotherapy provider or all these other topical ways, or fascial work or trigger point therapy. And then that can help your body more be open to whatever needs to happen in your digestive tract to heal your gut microbiome. But, nothing's random. I had a mentor in school teach me that. She's like, nothing's random in the body. And so, there's probably a combination of events and experiences. And then the C-section scar could have been a trigger that then you had this, diagnosis. So I would just encourage you to really work with someone who's dedicated to helping you find the root cause. And this can totally, you can live a healthy life and heal this. You just need the right tools.
I agree, fully agree. Great answer, thank you. And now, there are more questions, but before we go to those, how does someone do your event successfully?
It's a good question. Everyone's going to probably have a different answer. But so this is a unique summit. We did a different model because I'm really inviting these amazing speakers who are, very, they're in the work, so they're scientists, researchers, physicians. And so we have a 15 to 20 minute free lecture that everyone has access to during this week. So I would say, look on the calendar, see what resonates with you, and, make sure that you listen. And then if you want to take your learning a step further, we have more of a paid version where you get an hour lecture from all of these speakers. So you can go dive deeper into these conversations and these topics. And so it's a really meaty conference, and we have a lot of information. So I just encourage you, why we do this is we want to educate everyone and have a lot of information accessible and free. So the summit is made during the free week that you can taste a lot of information, not get hopefully too overwhelmed because they're not too long of interviews. And then if you want to go deeper, you can choose to do that.
That's great. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Angela asked the question, I've recently I have read recently that root canals are not ideal in dental treatment. I was told that I need several, but am not wanting to go that route. What is your opinion?
Yeah, I don't recommend root canals. Of course, everyone's individual. Dr. Nunley talks about this with Dr. Freeman on the speaker series. So a root canal is essentially a dead tooth. And so what happens is a dentist will pull the nerve and then fill the tooth with often non-biocompatible materials and say, oh, the tooth is fine, it's sterile, it won't cause problems. But we know over time that this can be a source of microbes and pathogens that can enter the bloodstream and be a source of focal infection that can affect your systemic body. We know even, the American Heart Association knows that our oral microbiome has so much to do with our heart health. So I think a root canal, while it's a very standard recommendation, I would seek a biological dentist. And there are two organizations. One is the IAOMT.org. And then I can never remember the other one, but it's like the International Academy of Biological Dentistry. So just Google that. And there's a lot more biological dentists in the area, and they will, or in our country, and they will give you options and solutions and tell you that perspective.
I would second everything you said. Root canal is a very last resort when nothing else can be done, not a first option. And look for a biological dentist. These are the ones who are trained in a more holistic approach to working in the mouth. And the organizations that Dr. Schaffner just recommended are great. So start there.
Thank you.
The next question from Naomi. I'm reacting to 5G. Would this be related to heavy metal toxicity? It seems to be targeting areas that have previously been damaged from surgery, thyroid, breast tissue from mammogram. Any thoughts? And thank you for your wonderful work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's like we're all kind of in this grand experiment, right, with EMF and 5G now around the corner. And so we're all trying to learn very quickly how this is affecting our physiology. And so one thing that I've seen clinically is that, EMF is not good for anyone and it's cumulative, but some of us feel it in our bodies more. And the people who tend to feel it often have a high heavy metal burden. And so one of the strategies is, of course, to have EMF hygiene and all the things that Dr. Tom educates, but also to have a really great detox program with a provider. And it's interesting, if it's the areas that have been affected by surgery, there could be scar tissue in that area. And scar tissue is kind of like a net, and it can actually, heavy metals or other environmental toxicants can get lodged in that connective tissue and kind of make that tissue more susceptible or vulnerable for those symptoms. So yeah, it's a complicated, process, but, I would say try to figure out, where your 5G antennas are. There's a lot of great shielding technology and balancing and harmonizing technology in the market, and then also work with a provider who can safely help you to remove these metals out of your system.
This is a great one. This is from Diane. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but Diane, I love your approach. I was blessed, she has in quotation marks, with ulcerative colitis at age 12, vitiligo at age 20, colon cancer at 26, celiac disease age 50, and have been gluten-free for 3 years with a smiley face. Even my 14-year-old dog has totally benefited from a gluten-free and fresh diet. I'm living happily and healthy thanks to my lifelong gastroenterologist and Dr. Tom's book. The main problem I'm still not able to gain any relief is vitiligo. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, gosh, right. Been through a lot. So just the question around how to deal with the vitiligo, Dr. Tom, or,
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, vitiligo is complicated. I have one patient I'm thinking in particular, that she had a really high mercury load. And I think mercury is a big trigger for the depigmentation. And one of the things though that we're doing, which is really exciting, is we're using a peptide. There's peptide therapy now is more accessible on the market, and peptides are strings of amino acids. And there's a peptide called melanotan, and it can help bring the pigment back back in the vitiligo, which I was just floored to see. So that's kind of a newer treatment, but it shares that what's possible, you know, that you can repigment these areas given the right kind of combination. But I find my knowledge, and again, I just have my perspective that mercury is often a big trigger for vitiligo.
My daughter, I agree with you. My daughter had that as a teenager, and then once again, when she went off to undergrad, about 5 years later, Dad, well, you know what to do. I've already told you what to do, right? Stop eating so much garbage. You're at college now, but stop all that. Get on a detox protocol. And she also had heavy metals. So I agree with you. A detox or flushing. First, identifying what might be accumulating, what heavy metals might be there, or toxic chemicals your immune system is fighting. And then a safe, non-aggressive, take your time to flush this stuff out of there, and just slowly bring it out. Mark, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this correctly. Marijke, M-A-R-I-J-K-E, from McGregor, South Africa, says, makes so much sense, the highlighting or low. Highlighting or low. Yes, like the analogies. Well, thank you so much for that, and welcome. Glad you're here. Let's see. Diane says, I've heard the term base hits from Dr. Tom, but not sure what it means. We just finished the first base hits program where I went into a deep dive.
He's frozen, but I'm
Foundation. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. Costa Rica, the price of being in Costa Rica. We just did a deep dive over 4 weeks, a base hits program, where every week I spent 2.5 to 3 hours with a select group of people answering their questions on a particular topic. The 4 topics that I consider essential. 1, detoxification, and why it has to be a part of awareness in your everyday life. Not once every 3 months, not once every 6 months, but understanding detox on a regular basis without getting crazy about it and how to do it. The next week was about inflammation. The next week was about the immune system, autoimmunity. And the 4th week was on the gut-brain connection. And we did a deep dive in all that. And some people gave a really nice testimonial, and we're doing it again. And it's at theDr.com/base hits. And we'll put a link there for you. So Diane, that's what the base hits program was all about. Let's see. Kat asks, have you posted the link yet to her seminars? I think that means this event, and it should be posted. My team should have posted the link here for Dr. Schaffner's event. I can't see what they're posting, but I'm going to assume it's there already.
Your team posted.
Yeah. Oh, and then somebody.
And we posted the link to base hits just to let everyone know that that's something they should do as well.
Thank you so much. Kat asks a question. Do you believe in the jewelry that is supposed to keep us from 5G harm? Necklaces, bracelets, etc. Dr. Christine.
Yeah, I'm open, to a lot of different tools that can support us. I am in conversations with a colleague and an old friend, Dr. Mindy Beck, who has a company called Matrix, and she has worked with this French researcher that she is integrating that insight in this technology to help balance and harmonize and transform the frequencies. I'm still in the infancy of learning about her products and using them. But yeah, I think there's going to be not only a combination of just safe practices and personal everyday use. There is some, warrant to shielding, especially I think the bedroom. And then I do think there are going to be some harmonizers or wearable technologies that can help balance our body throughout the day.
I agree. And if you look at the world of gemology, the world of gems, it goes back thousands of years when they talk about different stones or different metals like gold or silver and how it affects the body, and different precious jewels and semi-precious jewels. For literally thousands of years, they've been writing about the benefits of different stones. When I was first out in practice, you know, I don't think this is really obvious, but I'm an introvert. And I like quiet time, but I'm so out there and boisterous because I'm teaching, right? But working with patients one-on-one, you know, we had a busy practice, so all day long, and the energies that people come in with sometimes they're very appreciative, but sometimes they're suffering and they're not nice, you know. And as an introvert, I would sometimes take in some of that energy. I'd go home feeling really depleted and almost sick at times. That doesn't work. I can't do that. And so I learned about stones, and I read that rose quartz is a stone that protects your body against energy coming at you, and especially human energy. I started carrying a rose quartz crystal in my pocket. I don't know if it did anything, but I sure felt better. And when I did that, I also realized that, all right, I'm just a channel here. So I'm just going to keep grounded in the room. I'm going to feel my feet through my shoes standing on the earth. I'm standing on the earth, and whatever energy is coming through is going right through and down into the earth. So I consciously thought about that. And I had a rose quartz stone for a force field around me. You know, you think of Worf on Star Trek when he says shields, right? And the shields go up around your body, right? That's the way I thought about the rose quartz, and it seemed to help. It really seemed to help. So I do believe that stones have an effect on our bodies, a beneficial effect or detrimental, depending on what they are. And as you said, Dr. Christine, as you said it, I'd completely forgotten about it, and I thank you for even referencing it, that putting some shielding in, especially in the bedroom where you spend so many hours, minimize the amount of 5G or any electromagnetic pollution. All of you here have heard me say before, turn off the Wi-Fi at night when you're sleeping. You don't need it in the house. But also the concept, there are some paints that are supposedly protective. They keep electromagnetic pollution out. And I think, you know, we're going to have a baby in a few months now, and I think I'm going to paint the bedroom with some of that protective paint. It's certainly not going to hurt, and it may help this much. And as you've heard me say many, many times, base hits win the ball game. So all the little things we do make the difference.
We did that for my daughter. We shielded her bedroom in our bedroom. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Bridget asked the question, how would you address a teenager's neurological tic expressed as varying symptoms such as hand flailing, shoulder twitches, leg movements, mouth movements? This has been going on for over 10 years and gets worse when the teen is under physical stress or dealing with a, quote, virus.
Yeah, you know, that's often a symptom of PANS or PANDAS. And so there's the neurozoomer or the Cunningham panel that can identify what there could be, you know, triggers. And then if there's what triggers are creating essentially inflammation in the brain and creating these, you know, these tics and these symptoms. And so often, as you said, like a viral infection can be a trigger, strep can be a trigger, other like Lyme and co-infections such as Bartonella again can be a trigger. So it's this combination of identifying, you know, what the pathogen, the trigger, and what kind of neuroinflammation is happening, and then having a comprehensive program to deal with that.
Agreed. You know, the whole concept of PANDAS, as Dr. Schaffner just said, it's a short PANDAS, and it stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders associated with a streptococcal antibody. That many of these kids had a strep infection at some point. And when they had the strep infection, their immune system, trying to protect them, makes antibodies to fight strep. Those antibodies to fight strep are looking for a particular protein signature in the strep to attack it. It's kind of like an orange vest. So the antibodies are looking for orange vests in the body, and it's a protein signature. Some of your nerve tissue in your brain and in your body looks like the protein signature of the Streptococcus bacteria. It looks like an orange vest. So the antibodies attack the orange vest, but it's your brain. Pandas. And that's what these kids get. So to the person who asked the question, that was Bridget, just Google PANDAS, read about it. And then certainly the first thing on my list would be to look for elevated antibodies to Streptococcus. And if that's the case, then you have an idea of what direction you have to go in. You have to find a practitioner that can help you work with that. So thank you for that question. And thank you, Dr. Schaffner, for your answer.
Of course.
Let's see, Angela says, biological / holistic dentist, IAOMT certified. Thank you, Angela. Does spray on magnesium really work for nighttime leg cramps? And what causes nighttime leg cramps?
I'm getting the sun here coming, the Seattle sun. So topical magnesium absolutely can help with leg cramps. I also think of electrolytes and, that can be sodium chloride and potassium as well. And so, leg cramps can be caused by a lot of different things, but that's low hanging fruit to start with. And I would definitely, try that, and that could be an easy fix.
Agreed. Dr. Schaffner, are there any other aspects about the summit that you would like to make sure people know about?
I think we've covered a lot, but it was just such a, it was one of those things that the timing just worked out, and the topic I felt really passionate about, and a lot of people just really in a short amount of time, we produced this and recorded it, and was, I think it's just, for me, I think there is, with the medicine that you and I both believe in and we practice and we see work all the time, it still surprises me how it's still, not mainstream, right? And so when we hear, so much fear in society right now and people just not feeling like they have all these tools, I just want to really empower people, whether you have, acute illness or chronic illness. There are so many things to do and so many tools to support your health. And I think bioregulatory medicine really has this amazing narrative to educate people on this topic. So I was really excited to get this information out there.
Yeah, I agree. And your roster of speakers is really impressive.
Thank you.
And that you already have 63,000 people registered and watching this event is really a great thing. So thank you very much that all of these people are getting so much great information. And once again, everyone should register. Just click the link here and register. You don't have to watch every interview and try to remember every single thing. You watch it for a few minutes, you see if it resonates with you, and if it does, you stay. And you've heard me say before, my philosophy is if there's one thing, just one thing that you take away from an event and it stays with you for the rest of your life, you may have heard 50 things that are really good, but if one thing stays with you, that event was well worthwhile. Well worthwhile for your time to do. So Dr. Schaffner, thank you again so much for being here, and thank you for the work you do. You not only are a pioneer, but you're a courageous pioneer, forging the trail for so many doctors to follow and learn from, and so many tens of thousands of patients to learn from. So thank you very much, and Godspeed on this journey that you have with this summit.
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Tom. It's always a joy to see you, and thank you for the opportunity to share this information with your community. I really appreciate it.
Of course. All right, everyone, we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.